Good morning. It's Friday, July 28, 2017. Our panelists today, Jonathan Breckenridge, an aerospace engineer and a political analyst. Frank Ward joins us as well. I'm Dale Jackson, and you're watching Yellowhammer TV live. Thank you for joining us on Yellowhammer TV Live. Lots of news in the world today. Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions kind of continue their war. There is chaos in the White House between a new communications director in Reince Priebus, and the Senate cannot get anything done on Obamacare repeal. Let's go ahead and get to it. Let's get to the headlines. You know, this White House is basically an open war. Total chaos at every opportunity. You have, of course, the president and Jeff Sessions fighting. You have Scaramucci, the new communications director, and Reince Priebus fighting. You have leaks happening all over the place. I mean, it is total and utter chaos. Now, his campaign was complete chaos, and that worked for him. But Jonathan, Frank, this is governing, and apparently this is a lot harder than standing on a stage and talking about what you're going to do. This is about what you're actually doing. We'll talk about the health care bill and how it failed here in just a second. But this is chaotic. I can't even sit here today and read into this television camera the words being used by the White House's communications director without somebody running over and knocking the camera over and taking us off the air, because it's just not, you can't say these things on television. Frank, total chaos, way worse than the campaign, and the impact is much bigger, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it sounds crazy because it is crazy. And I keep thinking that maybe things will kind of die down, but coming out of this White House, it's just one nutball thing after another. And you would think it's coming from the communications director, someone in that position. It should be someone who's media savvy, who understands the implications. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, and I completely agree. And like you said, it just seems like it's one thing after another. And you said something that has been said repeatedly. You know, maybe now they'll turn it around, or now they'll start behaving in a different way. That was said after the primary, or after the general, or after the inauguration, or after this. The guy's 71 years old, okay? He's not going to turn around and grow up one day. I mean, this is basically what we have to look forward to the rest of the time, right, Jonathan?
This isn't politics. This is The Apprentice. Okay. And it's not even The Apprentice, it's Celebrity Apprentice. I mean, you've got a three-way race going on in the White House between Priebus, Bannon, and Scaramucci at this point. I mean, this is the last 4 episodes of Celebrity Apprentice at this point. Yeah, and they're trying to figure out who's going to win.
I think by the end we'll see Meatloaf and Little John and Kathy Griffin will all be in the White House, and I don't know what would be different.
Who needs Saturday Night Live at this point?
Yeah,
you know?
And the problem is it all depends where you stand politically. Because if you want something accomplished, if you want the Trump administration to be able to accomplish their mission, this is chaotic, and you don't want this. But if you're on the other side, this is kind of good for you. The demonization of Donald Trump is complete by the media. That's what they're trying to do. Now it's the self-marginalization. Do the people on the left truly want them to get together, or would they be okay with this for 3.5 more years?
Well, I mean,
7.5.
I think. Help us. You know, I think there's some of both. There are people who would like to, and I know I would like to see the both sides get together. But this is a good second. If you can't have that, then at least it's somewhat cathartic.
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan, any end in sight of this stuff, or is this just this is what we're going to get?
This is the new norm. I mean, I don't see any other way forward. Nothing that Trump has done is leading me to believe that he's changing in any way.
And we didn't even talk about the Jeff Sessions stuff in this. We'll come back to this later, but I mean, that's still probably in any other administration, that's the biggest news of the day forever until they resolve it.
If it wasn't that this is the country that leads the free world, and it's just tragic to see how we're looking on the world stage, it would be funny. But it's not. It's just sad.
All right, let's continue on to the second subject, the White House and the Senate were unable to get through any type of repeal. Before we get to the disaster that this thing became, let's talk about the fact that before they voted on this, guys like Lindsey Graham went to the camera and said, I'd like to vote on this, but if it passes, I'm afraid the House might concur and this will become the law. Which is crazy. If you don't like it, change the thing. But they were saying the way it's written right now is so bad that we're scared the House will come into session and say, we agree, and then it becomes the law. They were saying this before it was passed. That didn't bode well, right, Jonathan?
No. So we were talking before about how the White House is operating in a way that is not political. It's just showmanship. This is political. Everything that they're doing is about politics. It's about trying to get reelected. I mean, if you look in 2015, 7 Republicans that voted against the bill that looked exactly like it did in 2015 voted against it this time. Yeah. And so also 5 of those 7 Republicans are from states that have expanded Medicaid.
Yeah. So they don't want to change it because
right.
they're benefiting in a sense. You know, that bill obviously went down, and then this thing went down last night in the dark of night. John McCain, they have video of him talking to Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn from Texas. Chuck Schumer walks away smiling, and John Cornyn gives a thumbs down. Later on, he talks to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump can't convince him. And basically, you have a guy here who's in the middle of the road who came all the way back from Arizona after brain surgery to kill this? I mean, I don't think, and Donald Trump wasn't able to get that guy across the finish line because he's just destroyed his credibility with everyone in that body.
Well, I think certainly Trump has no political pull on McCain at this point, if he ever really did. But I think it's a signal of how bad the bill is. I mean, we talk about McCain is a guy who's so loyal to party. After everything that Trump said about McCain, he still voted for him.
Yeah.
But he couldn't bring himself to vote for this bill, which tells me he thought in his heart of hearts that it was a bad bill, and I think it actually is very bad.
Well, that may be true, but here's the odd thing about this. You know, the question is, where the hell is Donald Trump? I mean, the reality is it's easy to pick up the phone and call McCain. But Obama went out and was holding rallies and events when Obamacare passed and basically bludgeoning people with his popularity into voting for his personal popularity into voting for that bill.
Right. Why would you want to do that when you can attack your own AG and then in front of the Boy Scouts talk about how great you are and just give a campaign speech?
You make a great point because who's friends with McCain? Jeff Sessions.
Right.
You know, I mean, these are people he worked in that body and. You know, hey, you watched me destroy one of your friends for hours now, help me out, or for days now. All right, let's move to Jeff Sessions. A sad interview last night on Fox News' Tucker Carlson. What you saw was Jeff Sessions being interviewed in a hallway and saying, my feelings are hurt. Now, this is not what you expect from a Jeff Sessions or an attorney general who's down in Nicaragua, down in South America, meeting with other attorney generals about fighting gangs and MS-13 and all this other stuff, and they got to pull him aside and say, hey, did the president hurt your feelings? Do you feel like you're gonna be able to stay? And he basically said, my feelings are hurt, but I'm going to stay as long as I want. Oh, yeah, by the way, I still haven't talked to the president of the United States. So the first question is, does he survive this? The rumor and innuendo said he'd be fired or resigned by the end of today. He's still there, so it might happen. Who knows? But does he survive, Jonathan?
Again, like we talked about the other day, I can't look at this any other way but with intellectual honesty and logic, and it makes no sense whatsoever for Trump to just come out and fire Sessions because he's not going to get another AG. They've already said that the schedule's packed.
Yeah.
They're for the rest of the year. They're not going to put anybody else up. They're not going to.
So that's why he berates him
for the AG.
That's why he berates him into resigning, because then he can go and say, "Look, I didn't fire him. He quit on his own."
And there are only 3 options here. One is resign, the other is get fired, and the third is continue to muddle on with almost zero communication and bad blood between the president and AG. And none of those options are, I think, good for Trump. I mean,
what I find
maybe the
odd
resign option more than others. But
Well, the thing is that the only person muddling along is Trump.
Well,
Sessions isn't muddling along. He's out there doing what he needs to do.
Sure.
He's got to deal with the comments, but that's all he's dealing with.
Right, but there's this cloud hanging over everything he does, and every day is another day where instead of talking about this, we could be saying, okay, Trump has come out and said, I'm not firing him, I don't want him to resign, my bad, I shouldn't have been doing that. Not that I expect that, my bad, I shouldn't be doing this from Trump at any time. But this is an opportunity for Trump to come out and say, look, we're done with this. We're moving on. We're going to work together. We're going to do this stuff. And it just seems like it's not going to happen. So Trump has to fire him because Sessions says he's not resigning. So forget about is he going to go. If he goes, fired or resign? Jonathan?
Fired.
Frank, fired or resign? Which is it?
fired. If he was going to resign, there's plenty of reason to have resigned already if he was going to
So
do
he's
it.
going to make him fire him. I mean, that's
I think that's-
and you hear people all the time saying, make him fire you. Go ahead and do it. Make him fire you. And this seems to be the general consensus. And I honestly believe that this kind of stuff hurt the health care bill. And because just the chaos in there. I mean, the simple fact is, if you're on good terms with Jeff Sessions and you're talking to him, you could have called Jeff Sessions and said, hey, I need you to make a phone call to John McCain. Hey, I need you to help pull this thing over the finish line and make this happen. And instead, he's at war with his own AG, and it's just kind of sad to see. All right, moving on. Lastly, here's something that everybody wants to talk about, Hillary Clinton. She wrote a book, and her book is called What Happened. And in this book, she's going to apparently lay out what happened during her election and why she is not currently the president of the United States. I think we all know what happened. She's the worst presidential candidate in the history of this country, who lost to the second worst presidential candidate in the history of the country. Frank, by your body language, it tells me that you don't think she was the worst presidential
I'm not
candidate.
the biggest.
So what happened?
Well, I'm not the biggest Hillary Clinton fan ever. But to say she's the worst, Aaron Burr maybe? I don't know. And I'm sure there have been a lot. Well, there have been a lot of other bad candidates. I think she is far and away so much better of a candidate than Trump, even if you don't like her personally.
You know the election happened already, right? And Donald Trump won the election.
Oh,
That's where
absolutely.
he can't be the worst candidate.
So winning doesn't make you. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you're looking.
What's the end game?
Well, no. I'm saying a candidate as far as the actual outcome for the country. Okay.
No. You're looking at this the wrong way. Jonathan, what happened? Write the book for her. What happened in this situation?
Well, okay, so I think there was a lot of different things that went terribly wrong. And I'm no fan of Hillary Clinton either.
Yeah.
But she's not trustworthy at all. There are, and Frank is going to freak out on this one, but you've got to still
He's heavy
look
sign
at the
over
emails.
there.
I know. The point is that she worked with the Democrats to push out somebody who was deeply embedded with the young people in America, and it was a nefarious way of doing it. Whether it was, obviously it wasn't illegal to do it, but it didn't come off well. And the Sanders voters are still upset about it.
So
I think a lot of it was.
Okay.
I think a lot more of it was about the way that she treated Sanders and the Sanders supporters, the way that she got him out of the race.
I think they came around. I truly think they came around at the end because anyone but Trump. I think the real issue was that she had no message for Middle America. But what she's going to do here is apparently blame the Russians for the election, which is going to create a whole other story here where Hillary Clinton just can't let this thing go. And, before the election, Donald Trump must accept what happened. Donald Trump must. And then now we have this.
Well, there's a ton of blame to go around. I think, and she probably will pin it on a few one or two major causes. But there's so many things that you could point to as being factors.
No, now in 2020. There are people who are talking about her for 2020. She's like 70-something years old, but so is Donald Trump. No? And that's the question on the screen. Do Democrats just want Hillary Clinton to go away? I mean, why keep rehashing this open wound and saying, what happened? Do Democrats just want her to go away?
I think so. Yeah, I think, well, there's enough history with the Clintons, that a clean slate would be so much better.
Do Republicans want her to go away?
I think so.
I don't. I think they
So,
would. God,
so
come
here's
on,
the thing.
here's some money. Run again.
Here's the thing, though. They're grooming Chelsea. I mean, they really are. They're grooming Chelsea for a potential Senate race in New York, and then Hillary has yet to decline the fact that she may or may not be running for governor.
Get out. I will make a donation to Hillary Clinton if she decides to run for president, because nothing will assure Donald Trump's reelection more than Hillary Clinton being on the other side.
The other thing that I'd like to say real quick is it will be interesting to see how all this Russian stuff plays out with the Bill Browder and the Fusion GPS things that are coming out now.
Okay, so you're in on this, all these other things.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
The stuff that I've read and seen sounds pretty interesting.
No, it is interesting, and we'll see how all of this plays, because there are multiple angles to the ongoing investigation. So we'll see where all this goes. But I don't think we'll see a Hillary Clinton in an orange jumpsuit anytime soon. So I don't think that's going to happen. All right, let's take a quick time out. When we come back, we'll talk about the Jeff Sessions saga and what exactly it means to this Alabama Senate race. It's changing. We'll talk about it next, right here on Yellowhammer TV Live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. Jonathan Breckenridge, Frank Ward join us to continue talking about what's going on in the world and around the state. Let's get to it. This Sessions saga with Donald Trump has worked its way into the Senate race early on, and it continues. Now, I want to talk to you guys about something that I've learned over the last 24 hours. Donald Trump's numbers in the state of Alabama, since he has started attacking Jeff Sessions, former senator of Alabama, now currently the AG, Donald Trump's numbers in some internal polling has had him drop 20 points over a couple of days. That's a huge drop. Wildly popular in Alabama. And keep in mind, this is amongst Republican likely primary voters. So we're talking about, you take the big picture, and then you take Republicans, and then you take likely primary voters. But these are the people that are going to decide who the next United States senator are. Does that surprise you? I mean, these are the hardest core of the hardcore Republicans. These are people that are going to show up for a special election for the United States Senate, one thing on the ballot, August 15th, likely Republican voters. 20 points they drop amongst the president, or the president drops 20 points amongst these people. Does that surprise you?
No. Alabama loves Jeff Sessions. He's one of the best things that's come out of the state, as far as Frank would disagree, but he's done a great job for the state. He's brought a lot of things in. He's done a lot of good work in D.C. and seeing the president attack him the way that he has, I think, and seeing these poll numbers, I think shows the fact that that's a valid.
Ignoring Frank laughing, and we'll talk about what he thinks here in a second. You know, it's funny. I think a big part of this is how Jeff Sessions has handled this. Jeff Sessions hasn't fired back. Mm-hmm. Jeff Sessions hasn't been insubordinate. Jeff Sessions just continues going, as was mentioned earlier, just continues going on about his business. And Donald Trump's response to that is to call him weak and continue attacking him. Frank, you laughed.
I laughed at the comment that Jeff Sessions is one of the best things to come out of Alabama. But I do agree. There are a lot of things I do like about Jeff Sessions. Not particularly his politics, but I think he's a guy who tries to do his best. He's honest. I think he's trying to do his job as Attorney General by the book, and I think he loves his country and cares about it.
Okay, so we watch. We set the stage here. 20-point drop. The real question about these polls, and people always say, "Well, are these legit? Are these legit?" And my response is always, the politicians think they're legit. You know, they believe these numbers. Mm-hmm. And the way we'll know if they believe these numbers is if there's a strategy change. Now, we've already seen Mo Brooks basically do a little bit of a shift here away from I'm on board with Donald Trump's. It's always been I'm on board with his policies, but he's been a little more outright critical of his behavior at this point. Still on board with his policies, not happy with his behavior. Luther Strange, again, I've mentioned this before, seems to be living in some alternate universe where he puts out statements that Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump are working together to make America great again, which is silly because nobody believes that's actually happening. but that is basically a poll-tested, consultant-driven answer to, hey, just say you like everybody, and if anyone's upset with Sessions or upset with Trump, they'll be okay with you. If they're still with Trump, they'll be okay with you because you've taken both sides here. Does Strange change his strategy, or is he too far down that path to do that?
Well, you can always change your strategy, especially the public doesn't have a very long-term memory on these things. He'll change his strategy if those poll numbers continue to go the way they're trending now.
Okay, Jonathan, if Luther Strange continues this, hey, everything's fine, I love them both, isn't it great, everything's wonderful, if he continues down that path, I mean, do people see through that?
No, I think so. Yeah, I mean, the voters the likely voters in primaries are the ones that are paying attention to what's going on. So they're going to see that Strange is blowing smoke out of both sides of his mouth.
Okay, so
and they know that Brooks is the integrity that Brooks showed by coming out and saying, hey, look, if Sessions gets fired or has to leave and he comes back, even though it's kind of a silly thing to do, it still shows the integrity of Mo Brooks. I think if anybody knows Mo Brooks, they know that that's just who he is. That's not a political move.
What you're talking about is where Brooks said everyone should drop out and Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's him. I'm siding with Sessions. That's sort of his argument. But as this conversation moves forward, you have Jeff Sessions still out there getting beat up by the president, even though it hasn't happened in like the last 24 hours, so that's good. But you still have these guys out there staking these positions out. Other polls out that I just want to talk about here real quick have Luther Strange and Roy Moore over 30 and Mo Brooks at 16. And some are declaring that the race is basically between these two. Is there enough time for Mo Brooks to make that gap up?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
In 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unstable situation, what's going on in Washington and how it affects Alabama. Should it be very concerning for Mo and his campaign? Yes, but is it over and done? No.
You know, Frank, since you wanted to laugh about Jeff Sessions earlier and Hillary Clinton, so let me ask you this. Who's the Democratic frontrunner?
I have no idea. I don't think there is one right now.
And the best part is it doesn't matter because we all know that this generally will be decided in a Republican primary. Right. So I think that's funny. All right, let's move on. When we come back, we'll talk about what the biggest news of the day is. Stay tuned. You're watching Yellowhammer TV Live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. We'll close out the week by discussing today's biggest stories. Jonathan, you're up first. What is today's biggest story?
So, biggest story for me is that a NASA astronaut, a European Space Agency astronaut, and a Russian cosmonaut are launching on a Soyuz space capsule at 11:41 this morning. And they should be docking with the International Space Station at 6 p.m.
So we're continuing to work with the Russians, at least on that. So
I mean,
in space, we are still on the same
That's some actual Russian code.
Okay, some actual Russian interference with our space program. All right, Frank, what's the biggest story for you today?
Well, I thought you were going to tell a joke about an astronaut, a cosmonaut, walk into a bar. The biggest story for me is that briefly, for the first time, I think, in my adult lifetime, we had a different richest man in the U.S. and I guess the world yesterday when Jeff Bezos for a few hours.
Did he go back down?
He did. It was the rise in the Amazon stock price was due to projections as far as earnings, and when the actual reports came out,
so let me ask
poor
you
guy.
this.
He gained and then lost like $400 million.
You know, it's
poor guy.
Which just seems, poor guy. You're right, like you said. And now you have Amazon trying to get involved in everything. The Washington Post, they bought Whole Foods, they bought all these things.
Yeah.
And the guy just has his finger in so many different pots that stuff like this can go up for. What was the issue? Why did it go up $400 million?
Why did it go up? Because they were expecting, it was ahead of the financial reports, and so people were buying on what they thought.
All right, the biggest news for me today, pretty simple. Sean Spicer. I can't get enough of this guy. The fact that after he gets, I'm not going to say kicked out of the White House, but after he leaves the White House, what does he do? He does two things. He goes and he talks to ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, MSNBC. We're going to be seeing this guy on TV. We're going to be seeing him as a commentator. Does he go on as the Trump defender, or does he go on as a scorned lover? I mean, which one does he become, Frank?
I hope the scorned lover.
That's you on. All right, Jonathan, what do you expect to see?
I expect to see the same thing.
I expect a staunch defender. I think that's probably what's going to happen. And then what gets even better, and Frank, you'll love this. This seems right up your alley. He is also being considered for Dancing with the Stars. Have you watched?
No.
Duh, he's lying. I know it. He definitely will watch if Sean Spicer is on Dancing with the Stars. Frank Ward, Jonathan Breckenridge, guys, thank you very much for being here. The show marks 3 weeks. We appreciate you watching. We'll be back next week on Tuesday for more Yellowhammer TV Live.